You know, I realized the other day that of all the videos that I put out for these movies, 3 years long, I've never mentioned Stephen King.
I'm gonna scare the hell out of you. And that's a promise.
And it's not because I don't like the guy, because I really do. The man's given us some of the best horror stories in the past 40 years. He's also given us some of the worst, but for every Langoliers and Tommyknockers, the guy's given us a Shining or a Pet Sematary to go with it. So I decided that in order to rectify my mistake, I will be looking at 3 different Stephen King films this year, and they may not be the ones that you'd think that I'd want to include. The Shining? No. Carrie? No. Maximum Overdrive?
We made you!
No, get back here!
Didn't you understand?
Wanda, no!
You can't do this!
Maybe next year. I decided to take a look at my 3 favorite Stephen King movie adaptations this year, and we have to start off with the one that got me into the guy in the first place, and that's Misery.
My friend of misery. My friend of misery.
Paul Sheldon is the author of a series of novels based around a character named Misery. When he gets into a car accident, he's rescued by Annie Wilkes, who just happens to be his biggest fan.
I've read everything of yours, but the Misery novels, I know them all by heart. All 8 of them.
Annie reads his next novel and is horrified to find out that Sheldon decided to George R.R. Martin her favorite character.
She can't be dead. Misery Chastain cannot be dead.
So while she has him in the house and unable to get help, she forces him to write a new one that lives up to her standards.
You're gonna write a new novel. Your greatest achievement ever. Misery's Return.
Meanwhile, some secrets about Annie's past come to light, and Paul takes matters into his own hands, killing Annie before she has a chance to do the same to him, and managing to make it out alive. Or does he?
I thought you were over.
I don't know if anyone could ever totally get over something like that.
Yeah, he does. That was a hallucination.
I just want to tell you I'm your #1 fan.
That's very sweet of you.
It should go without saying that the performances in this movie are remarkable. I mean, Kathy Bates won an Oscar for her portrayal of Annie Wilkes, and it was not a fluke.
I put 2 bullets in my gun. One for you and one for me. Oh, darling, it'll be so beautiful.
She constantly tread the line between cheery fan and sadistic stalker until it all came to a head in the end. So, for the runtime of the film, every time the door opens, you really don't know whether or not she's going to be pleased to see Paul or furious with something he's done in the house.
I've only got 2 chapters to go on this one, and I know when I finish, I'll just turn right to the first page and start reading it all over again.
I don't want her dead! I want her! And you murdered her!
Those scenes happened one after the other. That is amazing. Throughout the film, you see her facade slowly drain away, and you can pick up on her homicidal tendencies. She starts off as just a fangirl. She loves Paul Sheldon's work, she knows his habits for when he writes, and she even named one of her pets after her favorite character.
Misery.
Yes, I told you I was your #1 fan.
Is it wrong that by today's standards, that's the least weird thing about her? But you realize bit by bit that she's been keeping him away from the public, she's been lying about contacting the authorities or anybody who could come and get him, and she's keeping him all to herself. And this isn't to cast a negative light on anything that James Caan does in the film, because he is amazing too. It's no secret that Caan is a brilliant actor, and he is perfect in this part. It's just that, well, when you compare him to Kathy Bates, it's really hard to top that.
This time we'll need 2 glasses.
Oh, Paul.
Apparently everyone from Dustin Hoffman to Michael Douglas to Harrison Ford were offered the role, but Caan really knocks it out of the park here.
By dawn, we'll be able to give Misery back to the world.
The way he conveys the terror and fear while being trapped in the bed is just great. And his character is also adaptive and creative, finding ways to not only improve his situation bit by bit, but also plan several ways to kill the crazy bitch who's locking him up.
No! Not my misery!
And I'll be damned, one of them actually works. They work really well off of each other, and they manage to get a lot of great footage together with very little to work with. Since one of the characters is bedridden and the other one is taking care of them, it makes sense that the best scenes involve the 2 of them in a very closed space. This could have been a play production, and it would have been just as effective. Like the scene when she forces him to burn his new manuscript so he can work on a new story just for her and to clear his mind.
Can't you see it's what God wants?
The way that she carelessly sprays his bed with lighter fluid is just amazing. Or when he manages to turn the tables on Annie by holding something she cares about in a precarious situation.
Remember how for all those years nobody knew who Misery's real father was? Or if they'd ever be reunited? It's all right here.
Oh, you can't!
Why not? I learned it from you.
A lot of these scenes prove that sometimes all you need is two great actors, a wheelchair, and a typewriter. And sometimes all you need is a block of wood and a hammer.
Annie, for God's...
Shh, darling. Trust me.
God's sake!
It's for the best.
Annie, please!
This is, without a doubt, the movie's most talked about scene, and it differs slightly from the book. It's nothing short of fantastic, though.
I know you've been out.
After discovering that Paul's been trying to move around the house to get help, Annie decides that she can't have him getting around too much,
Is this what
so
you're looking
she
for?
takes care of it.
Do you know what they did to the native workers who stole diamonds? Don't worry, they didn't kill them. If they caught them, they had to make sure they could go on working, but they also had to make sure they could never run away. The operation was called Hobbling.
Everything about this scene works, from the description of the practice from Annie, to the setup, to the act itself. It is unbelievable.
Just one more.
A lot of movies will show you a decapitation or severing limbs, but not a lot of breaking bones, and this one just looks absolutely gruesome when all is said and done.
Annie, please!
Just the way the foot moves, the fact you don't have to watch the second one break to know it was just as brutal. It is one of the only moments of actual violence on screen, so when it happens, it is much more impactful.
God, I love you.
Oh, God, that's creepy. The whole movie builds suspense and tension with only like 3 real moments of physical release. There's the hobbling scene, there's the end of the policeman's character arc.
Mr. Sheldon?
Another case closed. Thanks for stopping by, detective. And there's the ending, where he fights her using the same typewriter that he used to write her novel.
You wanna eat it? Eat it till you choke, you sick, twisted fuck!
But you know what? Even in the non-violent scenes, all the scares in the movie still revolve around Annie herself, even when she's not on screen, which says a lot about her character. Anytime you hear a creak in the floorboards or a door handle move, you know that she's 1 minute away from causing him more harm. Once you know that she's more than a little unhinged, it makes it better every time you see her in that calm, cherub-like demeanor. Because you won't have to wait long to see that last glimpse of sanity just completely snap.
I'm gonna kill you, you lying cocksucker!
You know, for someone who doesn't like cursing, she does it pretty well by the end.
This isn't what happened last week. Have you all got amnesia? They just cheated us. This isn't fair. He didn't get out of the cock-a-doodie car.
But this might actually be my favorite scene in the film, because her version of Misery has to be perfect, so she won't accept anything less than a perfect solution to bringing her back from the dead. So she hammers Paul on all the continuity errors in his own book.
So there couldn't have been any experimental blood transfusion that saved her life. Misery was buried in the ground at the end, Paul, so you'll have to start there.
Isn't it amazing how much she obsesses over the source material and even tries to correct him on how to make his art? I mean, she's not nearly as crazy as she was in the book, where she doesn't quite hobble him, but instead cuts off his leg, cauterizing the wound with a blowtorch. And the cop who visits the house is actually stabbed with a crucifix, because a lot of King's work villainized the church and pious people. And the accident itself that gets Paul Sheldon into this mess in the first place, it's caused because he was drunk, which is a reflection of King's personal life, because he was so wasted most of the time when he was writing. He didn't even remember writing the ending to Cujo, where the kid died of dehydration in the car, because he was so messed up. I really like Stephen King, but I'm far from his #1 fan. I gotta say, there's really not a lot about this movie that I don't like. I mean, if I could take one thing out, I would have kept the entire movie to just Kathy Bates and James Caan. I think they can carry everything on their own, and they don't need any outside influence, which is why the scenes with the sheriff kind of cut the tension up.
Need some help? No, I'm enjoying myself. Thank you.
And I know that that might have been done to help pace out the movie a little bit more or extend the runtime, but every time he shows up, it's just distracting. It's like the bumbling cops in Last House on the Left. It's like, I want to watch something disturbing, and I don't need a crazy, stupid Dukes of Hazzard type thing going on here.
When you first came here, I only loved the writer part of Paul Sheldon. But now I know I love the rest of him, too.
Misery is a classic, and rightfully so. It's incredibly tense, it's well written, and brilliantly acted. The score and the setting keep you in the moment, and the acting keeps you guessing the entire way through how it's going to end. Kathy Bates won the 1991 Oscar for Best Actress because of this role, and it's safe to say it's one of the better examples of her work. James Caan is a great protagonist too, and he's incredibly sympathetic, so you root for him the entire way through. And if we're gonna go side by side here, this is one of the more faithful Stephen King adaptations, and it highlights some of his best work, even if it was during a time that he may or may not remember. If you're like me and you read the book first, you will not be disappointed with how anything on screen is portrayed. And if you haven't, chances are you'll be shocked at every turn, even if all Kathy Bates is doing on screen is just staring straight ahead. We'll take a look at some more Stephen King later on in the month, but before that, why don't we look at something a little bit sillier?
What the fuck was that?